Disclosure, I was invited by the Panzermuseum Munster. In this video I interview a former Leopard 2 gunner that faced German Wiesels on exercises. So I asked him particularly what the main challenges were facing Wiesels and what tactics they used. So this is not a comparison between the two eagles, but more the experience of one side with the other. So you as a Leopard 2 gunner faced Wiesels in a military exercise. How easy or difficult were they to detect?
Well, the Wiesel itself is a very small vehicle, and detecting is up from where it is. You have to know that when we as a platoon of tanks, Leopard 2, were deployed, we had like an area that we should have overwatch, and those Wiesels don't drive with full speed over the open field and get easily detected. They are made to do like flanking maneuvers, drive through terrain that is not suited for main battle tanks or other larger vehicles, and they could drive even through a dense forest because of their dimensions, both in size and weight. They could drive to any terrain that is not suited for even trucks, and therefore a good controlled Wiesel is mostly not possible to detect. Either you're looking there just by pure coincidence that you're looking into a forest and maybe then you see something moving there, but normally if they are already on your flanks it's too late and then you won't spot them. Most of the time they know exactly where you are, but on the other hand it's quite hard to detect them. When you are doing, for example, in German we call it Beobachtungshalt, where you stop, turn off the engine, and you also listen. If you can listen for engines and stuff like this. MBT, you can clearly recognize an MBT engine over several kilometers. And that's why normally in forests MBTs are driving with low RPM to be more silent. But Wiesel can get very close to you even if you don't hear it. It's compared to more to like a Fennec, if you know it, on the level of silent, it's possible. And that's the danger, that you can't really spot it on combat distances by sound, and through its movement, that it's that small, it can stay behind even smaller hills. If you see the size, it's comparable to like a Volkswagen Golf, or even smaller, I think, compared to the new ones. And it can just use anything as cover, small hills, even a shed or smaller buildings, and even what you have in forests, like this wood that you have in forests, sometimes from forest industry.
Ah, yes, these stacks of wood.
Yeah, everything can be used as cover for these systems, and normally you only see the weapon popping out, either the TOW or MELS now, the Spike ATGM, or the autocannon.
I heard, but I'm not sure if this is true, that they generally operated in a combination, that one with an autocannon and one was with an ATGM, and that it worked in pairs.
Yes, that's what I saw, that mostly these autocannons and these ATGM versions are working together, because obviously the ATGM is to engage the hard targets like main battle tanks or even APCs, while still this unit needs to defend itself if they get into infantry or get into softer vehicles. And there this 20mm is good enough to deal with infantry and smaller vehicles, and I think even with enough of IFVs like BMP-1 or BMP-2 in that case.
Now, in terms of maneuverability compared to the Leopard 2, and also what they can drive over, how does it compare broadly?
The biggest difference is obviously the dimensions, in especially the size, that with the Leopard you are still bound to either open fields or pathways and places where you can drive with your weight that you don't sink in, and where you can physically fit into it without like hitting stuff with the vehicle itself that will slow you down, especially with the cannon hitting trees. While the Wiesel can drive through many forests directly, because the distance between trees is often bigger than the weight of the vehicle itself. And that gives this Wiesel basically the possibility to drive everywhere it wants, and that with a decent amount of speed. While the Leopard has there to be a bit slower, even if he has all his engine power and his high top speed in open field. But this Wiesel is, let's say, off-road capabilities and off-map capabilities that you can expect it from terrains where you don't expect it, is better than the Leopard.
In terms of firepower, it's a bit hard to compare, but how would you compare it, a Leopard to a Wiesel in terms of what they can do or how much they are threat?
Well, the thing is, the Leopard has multiple objectives that he can do. He can still do the infantry support with high explosive. That's why he has a tank gun and not only like a ATGM. Meanwhile, the Wiesel is a small vehicle that can recon enemy forces, but also can do like these hits on special targets like a tank with this ATGM, that you can say, yeah, let's pick this tank, and don't have this role like MBT does. The MBT has several roles, including to threatening the enemy with its presence. That's still one thing that is kind of working, that it's like a moral weapon. You just have to see like how the internet is now comparing that Leopard is going to Ukraine and people are cheering about it. And the Wiesel is more like the smaller weapon or the deployment system of the weapon, because it's always depending on what is on this system. So they have different tasks and they can't do the same. That's the only thing that they maybe can do the same is destroying tanks with the ATGM version and the tank itself. But on a wider spectrum, they are made for different tasks.
Is it a bit like comparing an infantry company with a sniper?
Kinda, yeah. It's the same. You can say it's the same, yes.
What do you think of their tactics? How they were used? We already mentioned that they were used together, like one Wiesel with a machine cannon and one with an anti-tank guided missile. How did this work out? I mean, you were on the receiving end, I assume. So what did you see from their tactics?
Well, the thing that had most influence on us was obviously ATGM Wiesels, because they could take out us, and they tend into either in defensive roles to be on our flanks where we didn't expect them, like we were pushing and they were just waiting or in cover on the side to take us out from the side, or when we were defending, that they tried to outflank us both left and right in terrain that was hard to overwatch with our optics and our guns from our position. I mean, you have to know that the tank is not standing on a hill exposing itself. It's still trying to get a good position that is giving you both cover but also a good perspective to the enemy. And these vehicles will just outflank you or try to outflank you and use their strengths against you.
So what would you determine as the biggest strength, but also the biggest weaknesses of the Wiesel?
The biggest strength is obviously the size and the weapon, that you can have this combination, and also to a certain degree the survivability with compared to, let's say, ATV, like we saw in the Ukraine war earlier last year, where small teams with ATVs were moving around with ATGMs to attack Russian tanks from the side. But these ATVs are not protected against like shrapnels from bigger distances or even gunfire from a rifle caliber, where the Wiesel is giving to a certain degree protection. And the only downside that I can think of is the limited amount of firepower in terms of ammunition, that you have just a small amount of missiles that this vehicle can carry, and that let's say a bigger vehicle is capable of carrying more.
So in terms of endurance, it's high, it's limited in a long-standing battle.
Yes.
I saw the Wiesel once live at the Stahl auf der Heide event, where basically tanks drive in circles, and the ground was already ground up by the big tanks, and the Wiesel basically jumped almost around. And did you ever see a Wiesel flip over or something, or is this mainly a problem for inexperienced drivers or people that go reckless?
Well, for my service time, I only heard about a single vehicle flipping over, and it was a Mungo, but I never heard anything similar about a Wiesel that it's flipping over. And I think it's always depending on how experienced the driver is, how he's driving, and what the terrain is. I mean, you have to know that you are driving depending on your terrain, but also on the situation, that you're trying to minimize the noise that you're making, and also not to give away your position. When you drive on full speed on like dirt, you're also causing dust to come up that also can give away your position before you fire your weapon. So on dusty terrain that is flat, you would rather drive slowly, or you drive on the grass next to it, not on the dust itself. And in a forested area where you try to get close to an enemy, you're driving rather slow on low RPM just to don't give away your position.
So in a way, basically being sneaky protects against flipping over, I guess. So a final question, do you think the Wiesel in Ukraine could be used effectively? If so, in which situations and with what loadout?
Yes, I obviously think that this vehicle can do a lot of this, but there we have to talk not only about Wiesel 1 with the machine cannon and also the ATGM, but also systems based on Wiesel 2, either as a mobile mortar or a medivac, or even the Ocelot as a mobile short air defense system, because it can hide obviously quite well from recognition from the air, but also can engage smaller targets like helicopters quite well with the Stingers, or depending on what's using. I mean, we can expect that the Ukrainians are using any weapon system they can get onto it, if it's a Stinger or the Polish equivalent of it. But with the ATGM version, that's the question also which kind of ATGM they would use. Normally the vehicles had the tow, but then were converted to the spike, or the German version Mills. But it's also thinkable that they maybe deploy other ATGM systems that they're currently using, like their own Stuckner system or American Javelin system. So not only on a portable, on man-portable situation, but also on a vehicle-portable situation. So we can see this way in the combat role, but also on the non-combat role, defensive role, like Medivac. That is also, it can reach positions that are harder to reach by other vehicles, but still offering some degree of protection that, for example, a normal car wouldn't offer. And we saw videos of a Medivac being done with simple vans that got hit by machine gun fire or even harder weapons, causing more damage. And therefore I think that in any role the Wiesel would be deployed like it was developed, regardless of which exactly weapon that will be mounted on it, would actually do quite well there.
So a bit of question on maneuverability and everything. I suspect that the Wiesel, for instance, could be rather easily, or probably easier than a car, evades enemies. Or since there's a certain amount of time that an enemy shot, especially ATGM, needs to travel, I suspect the Wiesel can rather easily evade by doing a hard turn, which a car can't do that efficiently, or am I wrong?
Yeah, it's overall still a tracked vehicle, and therefore it gives you the turn radius of it, and also on not suited terrain for wheeled vehicles. I mean, a car can turn quite well on the road, obviously, but when it gets into a combat area where you can see like these roads where roads are bombed and shelled full of craters, there on this terrain a track is still having some more benefits compared to small wheeled vehicles on the same size. And therefore I think that it's quite well to get out of this. But firstly I would say that even getting spotted and shot at with the ATGM is much harder with this Wiesel compared to other vehicles, because it's smaller and harder to engage in the first place, and itself being a smaller target. I mean, hitting over several kilometers with the ATGM, a truck-sized target, is easier than hitting this small Wiesel. Same with the loitering ammunition. We can see plenty of videos where this loitering ammunition only hits, for example, the track of a tank, or only the, let's say, engine bay, but not the turret where it was clearly aimed for. And for example, that could cause a complete miss because of the very small size of the target.
Thank you very much for your time. Be sure to check out Tobias' channel if you're interested. It's in German. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye. Thank you to the Panzermuseum Munster for inviting me.